The 49ers just got exactly what they needed to hear. It's something that fans are resonating with. It is a mixture of harsh truth mixed with an excellent evaluation, plus the blueprint to go forward and get over the hump. I'm breaking this down, plus so much more in this video. Hit subscribe if you're looking for 49ers content. As always, my question of the day today comes out of some other news that came out. And the question is, how would you feel about the 49ers going center in the free agency? A center move that would be a splash move. Now, I was a big proponent of the Niners going after Drew Dalman last year. Talked about it many times on the channel. He ends up in Chicago. And Brendel, quietly had a much better season this year to last year. But what about this guy? CBS predicts the 49ers will sign Tyler Linderbaum to a 4-year, $72 million deal. An absolute splash move to help improve this offensive line. Now, Linderbaum ranked 5th among centers in overall PFF grade, 4th among centers in run blocking grade. I love that, absolutely. He's not elite in pass pro, however, but that being said, he is still an upgrade by virtually every metric you can find over Jake Brendel, who, despite having an improved season, ranked 31st among centers in pass protection himself. So, yes, it would be an upgrade. I'm not even sure. I didn't look at how Drew Dalman ranked after this season, but he's not the same kind of move that I was kind of vying for last year. It is an interesting move. Now, I'll be honest with you. I'm not asking you if you think this is going to happen. I really don't think this is the direction the Niners are going to go. I feel like Kyle Shanahan, part of having this mobile quarterback who can get out of situations, is, Shanahan doesn't want to put the same level of financial input into the offensive line, at least not yet. That might come soon, than he wants to put in other positions of the field. But my question for you is not, will he do it? Obviously, it'd be great if he did it. I mean, no one would complain about an upgrade. My question is, are you feeling good about that move, or does it immediately put concern in your mind about other positions that are not getting filled in free agency if he makes that move? You guys had some really fantastic comments yesterday. Leroy made a great point. So, I genuinely do really appreciate your guys' opinion, especially in the offseason, when there's not as much concrete day-to-day updates coming from Shanahan, coming from the organization. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. I look forward to seeing what you have to say. We're going to be talking about something else, though, based on, in part, what Brian Boldinger said on The Fan today. That kind of, or The Game, excuse me. That kind of fueled a lot of the conversation we're going to have today on the podcast. Let's start with this, though. The 49ers really do get exactly what they need from Brian Baldinger today. Several folks out there, by the way, not just Baldy, but guys out there spitting absolute facts about this team. And because of, I'm going to say this, I know this sounds horrible to say this, it's actually a really good thing in retrospect. The Niners lose to the Seahawks twice in almost the same fashion. Although their offense did much, much better in the second game against the Seahawks, or I should say the third game, if you will, the playoff game. Although that was the case, because they managed to fail to score points on so many drives over those two games, and because they failed to really unlock this Seahawks team the way that we saw the Rams do it just the other night, for example, I think it puts us in a position and I'm just speaking as a fan, obviously. I don't work for the organization or anything, but I think it puts the 49ers in a really good position to look long and hard at the facts. The Seahawks are not going anywhere. They have the best projected free agency spending money this upcoming season. Their cap space looks, they're top 5 in cap space this upcoming year. They're heading to the Super Bowl, which might not feel very good to 49ers fans, of course, but they are doing it, and they're doing it with a guy in Sam Darnold that most people, myself included, had completely written off. And he went out there and he had the best game of his career, as far as I can tell, in the NFC Championship game, something I didn't think Sam Darnold was capable of. I'm just saying it, or I'm just saying the facts. The good news that comes out of that is that now the 49ers have to really evaluate this. They can't just write it off because it happened twice. They can't write it off like I did the first time they lost and say, well, we can come back better next time. And we did, but not good enough, not even close. Here's what Baldy said about the situation, and this might sound negative, but I really do think this is good news for 49ers fans. I really mean that. What is it that makes the 49ers unable to score against the Seahawks, but the Rams can, is basically the question that's asked. He says they just don't have Puka on the roster. And then just the red zone game that Matthew Stafford has with Devontae Adams or his tight ends. They've got 4 tight ends that they dress every game that are all viable receivers. So basically, if we want to summarize this, what Baldy is saying is they don't have the weapons. Okay? Now, this is no knock on Brock Purdy. I put him, on the screen there. And we're going to talk about later what Brian Baldinger said about changes that the 49ers can make that can fix this problem this offseason. Okay? The Seahawks are not going anywhere. The Rams, however, they could go somewhere. I have a little bit of hope that, if Kubiak ends up going and taking a head coaching position somewhere, which, I don't know, it's looking less and less likely. But if Clint goes and gets a head coaching job, then that puts the Seahawks in a situation we've seen with like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where you can be really good, but eventually you keep losing your OC, it's going to come to bite you, and it can. So, look, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole. My point is, I think this is good news because what you're hearing is the 49ers just didn't have the same weapons that Stafford had available to him, and that is a huge factor in this game, according to Brian Baldinger. Brian Baldinger, when asked about what they should do, I had to quote this one myself there because no one else had it, on what we could do right now, what the 49ers could do right now to improve the offense. He said, I would add speed at receiver and upgrade the offensive line. Now, in terms of upgrading the offensive line, this is a fascinating question. I'd ask where that big problem lies for you. I think left guard is an obvious position to upgrade. I think center is mostly an obvious position, but I don't think the 49ers see the center position as an immediate need upgrade. They really like Jake Brendel, despite some of his faults. They really like him. He did improve massively in terms of penalties this year. He did not improve in pass pro, but he did improve in run blocking. So I just personally, based on what we've seen from Shanahan over the years, I don't think we're going to see a change at center. It's my personal opinion. I would love to be wrong because that would mean that the Niners find somebody they think is better than Jake Brendel, which means if they make the move, it's an improvement. But that being said, let me know in the comments what you think. I still think the move is to, at very least, draft an offensive tackle who you believe could be a future Trent Williams replacement and put him in at left guard. That's what I'd love to see, but, it's always easier on paper than it really is. Another question they asked, which kind of brings up this bigger conversation around the talent available to Brock Purdy, the guys that Brock Purdy's throwing to, should Jauan Jennings be in the talent pool? Should he be one of the guys the Niners are looking to keep around next year, extending his contract? And Brian Baldinger pretty much said it exactly as I see it. And you can disagree with Brian Baldinger. You can disagree with me, of course, as always. And we will never forget, of course, the intangibles, the leadership, all the on-field stuff, the blocking and all that stuff. But Brian Baldinger's point, I think, lines up really well with where I'm at on this. Everyone wants to get paid, and I understand that. All Jauan does is line up and play. He's been a big part of this offense. That's said as a positive, by the way, not as a negative. Like, all he does is line up and play. It's like, all he does is line up and play. That guy plays. But he's not a wide receiver 1, and you can question if he's a wide receiver 2. Then you go, is he expendable? Because I can go and find a big body wide receiver in the draft or in free agency and not have to spend that much money. This is just business right here. Not that I don't like Jauan or how he contributes, but it becomes a question of finance at this point. Once you paid Brock Purdy, other players have to go, and I agree with this point completely. If you're going to replace Brandon Aiyuk, it's not Jauan Jennings, no disrespect. It has to be someone who is the everything you need in a receiver type, right? On this topic, by the way, this is really interesting. Matt Maiocco wrote an article today. I don't have it up here, but I'll just read it for you real quick. The little section he has on what the Niners need to do at receiver. They need to fix receiver. He says the Seahawks have Jackson Smith-Njigba, who caught 119 passes for 1,783 yards and 10 touchdowns this regular season. The Rams have Puka Nacua, who had 129 receptions for 1,715 yards and 10 touchdowns. The 49ers do not have a dynamic, consistent wide receiver capable of beating press man coverage and getting open quickly for quarterback Brock Purdy. San Francisco drafted Ricky Pearsall and signed Brandon Aiyuk to a lucrative contract extension, both logical moves at the time. But Aiyuk got injured and separated himself from the team. Pearsall has been able to show only flashes of why the team selected him with the number 31 overall pick in the 2024 draft. The 49ers still have high hopes for Pearsall. Aiyuk has played his last game for the organization. This figures, again, to be a deep draft at wide receiver, and the 49ers should have options to improve that position throughout the draft. That is Matt Mayoko's opinion. Draft a wide receiver. If you look at the wide receivers on the whole, it's an interesting bunch you've got this year. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey leading the way pretty much every single game. He was your highest targeted receiver, so I'm not surprised there. But also, this grouping here, you've got a 79% reception percentage. He's targeted 25% of the time. A quarter of the time, the ball goes toward Christian McCaffrey, who did have 113 receptions, by the way, for over 1,000 yards, just to remind you. George Kittle, because of his injuries, did not get as many targets as he would have otherwise. And then you've got Ricky Pearsall, who only got targeted 9.4% of the time, was only targeted a total of 55 times, which is shy of where you would expect your former first rounder to be out there. You know how many targets you'd expect him to get. Demarcus Robinson misses a few games there because of the suspension to open the season. Kendrick Bourne has a couple big games, but overall, he's not your go-to guy. Jake Tonjes fills in nicely at times for George Kittle, but those guys are splitting snaps as your main pass-catching tight end. Kyle Juszczyk gets a few in there. Jauan Jennings has 98 targets, but only 58 receptions, a reception percentage of only 59.2%. Now, that's not all on Jauan Jennings. The ball has to be thrown in the right place. Jauan Jennings has to make the play. Sometimes it's the wide receiver's fault. Sometimes it's the quarterback's fault. That's part of the gig. Luke Farrell got a couple. Brian Robinson Jr. got a couple. Okay. Those are the wide receivers. When you look at that list, and to use Matt Mayoko's words, right? The Seahawks have Jackson Smith-Njigba. The Rams have Puka Nacua. And the 49ers have a great running back who can catch the ball, a great tight end who's aging and has been injured, a great wide receiver who's shown spurts and moments but has been injured a lot and been playing through injury. Give Ricky Pearsall credit for that. And that's pretty much your wide receiver room. And Jauan Jennings, who's a fantastic wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, who can get you out of binds and third and longs. Like, he's done some amazing things. No disrespect to him. He's going to be asking for a lot of money, though. And so he's a free agent that's going to be looking for big numbers. Just a reminder, too, Jauan Jennings, second in the league of interceptions when targeted. This is, of course, again, not a wide receiver only stat. This is a wide receiver and quarterback stat. This is an offensive scheme stat. There's a lot that goes into this. Jauan Jennings is at fault for 2 of them in my memory. And I think there could be more. If you guys watch the Kurt Warner footage, if Kurt Warner did a QB breakdown or an offense breakdown on the 49ers last week, or the end of last week, I think it was really, really interesting. Because I noticed Jauan Jennings, I'm not a film expert, all right? I'm just going to caveat that. I noticed Jauan Jennings on some of those routes kind of curving and trailing off a little bit, drifting a little bit. And I'm not saying Jauan Jennings is not a great receiver, but if he's your guy, he has to be the guy. And in Kyle Shanahan's system, the wide receiver, in my experience, like what I'm thinking, right, the Brandon Aiyuks of the world, they don't drift into bad coverage areas. They find their way into the zones when it's in zone coverage. And when it's in man, those routes are crisp because they need to be. And I just, I really like Jauan Jennings. I'm just going to leave it at that. I like him. When you look at the starting offensive snap counts, with injury involved, you can see all the red on there is injury. That's Brock Purdy missing a good chunk of games, George Kittle missing a good chunk of games, Brandon Aiyuk missing the entire season, Ricky Pearsall missing a good chunk of games, Ben Barch in there, but of course he's not a receiver, but he's an offensive player. So those are the injuries that the 49ers dealt with on offense, which are actually better than the defense, but not nothing. And I keep hearing people talk about how healthy the offense was. I'm like, yeah, kind of. but they also went a bunch of games, a load of games without their starting quarterback. They went a huge chunk of the season without George Kittle, and they never got their wide receiver one. They never got him, and they didn't bring in anybody to be the wide receiver one because they paid him insane money. So they expected Aiyuk to factor into the second half of the season, and that is a huge, huge reason, I think, why the Niners get into the playoffs, do what they do against the Philadelphia Eagles, but run out of gas when it's all said and done, playing 3 games on short weeks out of 4 and traveling and all of that mixed in there. I think they just ran out of legs. Their defense ran out of legs too, by the way. And don't take anything away from Brock Purdy, man. He had a great season considering everything that was in front of him. I understand if you want to make an argument otherwise. I get the injury situation, whatever, but I think to give him some credit. I already read the Matt Maiocco on the wide receiver situation, so I'll skip that part and remind you also what Daniel Jeremiah's initial projection was for the 49ers getting a guy like Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon. I think that's an interesting one. I went into it a little bit more detail in yesterday's video if you want to check that out for sure. But all of that being said, I want to close the video on a really, really interesting question that I think, again, I'd said harsh truth, but also a really solid evaluation, and I agree with the solid evaluation here. The question was, is this a GM problem for the 49ers? Do they have a GM problem? And here's how Brian Baldinger responded to whether or not the 49ers have a GM issue. He said, the 49ers had 7 of the highest paid players at their position in the league, whether it's Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Christian McCaffrey, Trent Williams, George Kittle. Not that Trent wasn't homegrown, but you can't argue against any of those guys. And something I fail to do a lot because I, like most fans, I think, look at the draft a lot. And we point out areas in the draft where the 49ers have missed, and they have had a lot of misses, especially in recent seasons. It feels like there's been a lot of misses because you're looking at the Seahawks and you're looking at the Rams and you're like, these are guys the Niners could have got, and they didn't. And that's okay. That happens to every team. But when you're looking at your own division, the toughest division in all of football this season, and you're figuring out how are the 49ers going to beat the Rams twice a season? How are the 49ers going to beat the Seahawks twice a season? Or better yet, how are the 49ers, when the NFC goes through Seattle or goes through Los Angeles, how are the Niners going to beat them then? That when it really matters and it's all said and done, I go back to what Baldy said from the very beginning. Number one, you got to figure out how to get more speed on your offense, and you got to figure out how to improve this offensive line. Those are 2 massive things you can do offensively to fix the problem. We do have challenge or questions on the defensive side as well, but I will agree with Baldy here and say this isn't a GM problem. You can criticize portions of what the Niners have done wrong, but you can't criticize the fact that they did bring in this many high-quality, talented players that just 2 years ago were the highest-ranked roster in the NFL by pretty much every metric, starting the 2024 season with 9 of the top 100 players in the NFL, on the next best team with only 7. So I'm just saying, I feel good about where the Niners are, who they have in the room, and I feel much better. I will feel much better about the 49ers when they go and solve some of these problems. Primarily, defensive line, offensive line improvements, and speed at receiver. Let me know what you guys think in the comments as always, and I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your Tuesday night.